Okay, look, Vanessa, let's just talk about sanctions in Syria. I'm sorry we had to bump that into the extra, but in the name of humanity, is what the graphic says: lift the sanctions against Syria.
I mean, talking of dark winters, Syria is heading into a very, very difficult time at the moment. Um, there is literally no fuel available, particularly at the government fuel stations that are to some degree subsidized. No one can afford to buy fuel on the black market. Of course, it's not only the sanctions, it's the occupation of the oil fields by the US. You know, things now are probably the hardest I've ever seen them. And we're coming into really the cold time now. It tends not to really hit hard until after Christmas, but January, February are going to be bitterly cold, and people literally have no heating. In the majority of Damascus and other regions, people are getting between half an hour and 1 hour of electricity per day. The Iranian tankers are slowly kind of dribbling in, but again, the United States is preventing delivery, or of course allowing Israel to bomb the road tankers or the convoys that are trying to come through Iraq, through Syria, and down through into Lebanon, that is also energy deprived at the moment. To give you an indication, though, with no fuel, hospitals now are on complete slowdown. It's almost impossible for the public hospitals to carry out operations. They don't have any fuel for generators. Restaurants, all of the kind of what I call fast food, but it's staple diet for Syrians. Falafel, shawarma, sandwiches. All of these bars are shutting down. The majority of shops and markets are having to shut at sunset because, again, they don't have generators to run. There are literally no cars on the road at the moment. Nothing. There's no public transport. The government, as an emergency measure, has increased the kind of the weekend from Friday and Saturday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday to try and make it so people don't have to travel for work or to go to university or to school, because it's impossible to get even public transport, even the service or the Pullman, which run on different fuel to normal cars here. But if you can imagine, the average salary in Syria is around $27 per month, 150,000 Syrian pounds. 20 liters of car fuel, which they call benzene here, on the black market is 200,000 to 300,000. So that gives you an indication that it's completely out of reach. Food is out of reach. Meat is out of reach. Cheese is out of reach of the majority of families here, below the 90% that are below the poverty line. So, what I'm asking is, what shocked me when I put out all this information on Twitter was the amount of people that said to me in response, "Oh, I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know Syria was under sanctions." I was like, it's only 11 years, you know? So I people really need to do something about this. You know, we need to accept that we have agency, and that agency, even if it's just writing an email, writing a letter, please do something. There are people literally dying here on the streets because of illegal sanctions that are being imposed by the UK and the US. It doesn't have UN mandate. They're unilateral sanctions. They're affecting humanitarian supplies and hospitals and medical supplies. That's illegal. It's completely illegal. It is punishing the Syrian people because Syria won the war against the West, basically, and the regime didn't fall. The government didn't topple. President Assad is not only still in power, but he's now, of course, pivoting like everyone is that's non aligned to the east. He's welcoming the prime minister of Belarus. He's having trade talks with Donetsk and Luhansk. Obviously, with China, UAE is now opening up businesses here in Damascus. South Africa, the embassy has reopened here. So, you know, Syria is pivoting away from the West. The West is becoming irrelevant. But for the people of Syria, the suffering continues. Their resources are being hijacked and held hostage. Their crops are being burned. Their water is being also occupied and rationed. They have no fuel, they have no electricity, they have no heating fuel at all, no gas. A bottle of gas, which will last 1 week for the average Syrian family, which can be extended up to 15, 20 people in one household, costs over now 200,000 on the market. As I said, the average salary, most people are below that, is 150,000. So they can't afford gas for heating and for cooking. I mean, it's very difficult for people to actually understand what life is like here, but it's the toughest it's ever been. And people, please, please do something. Raise hell on Twitter, on social media. Write to your governments. Get them, to your MP, to your representatives. This is a humanitarian issue. It's not a political issue. It's not a diplomatic issue. If you want an example of a very, very good statement made by Alina Durhan, who was appointed the UN Special Rapporteur on the effects of sanctions, go to my Substack. I've published it in full. That will give you all the ideas you need to put into an email or a letter. But please do it. Please don't just watch this and then kind of go back to doing what you were doing before. Please do something, because the Syrian people really do need it. I can't describe the suffering here and the hopelessness and the despair in Syria right now.
Is Russia doing anything to help on a humanitarian basis?
Of course, Russia is helping. It's helping to the best of its ability. I mean, it's helping more on a military front, of course. It's been increasing pressure on the United States, really by proxy through guerrilla warfare in the northeast. It's negotiating with Turkey and with the Kurds for the Kurds to withdraw and for the Syrian army to secure the borders with Turkey. It's doing everything it can, but to some degree, Russia has been helping since 2015. And don't forget also the Caesar sanctions that were applied under the Trump administration that penalize any nation that comes to the help of Syria. So to some degree, what Russia is doing can't be spoken about publicly, because Russia will receive further sanctions. China will receive further sanctions. South Africa, Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakian embassy stayed open throughout the conflict here. But they can't talk openly about what they're doing to try and help Syria, because their country will be penalized.
Well, Russia's also under sanctions, which makes it even
Yeah.
worse. Iran is a traditional ally of Syria, would normally do more, has trouble doing it. The whole game is to keep the border of Iraq and Syria unstable, so there can't be good, healthy cross trade across the region, and that isolates Syria. The problem is, and we can say the sanctions are illegal, and of course they are illegal under Geneva Conventions, international law, and other things. But in Europe and Britain and the United States especially, and Canada, they don't see it as illegal. They disregard international law. Of course, that's the real problem. So then you're left with what? You need to be targeted. You got to find out if there are any sympathetic MPs in England or in the UK or in Ireland or in Europe, real members of parliament, not European parliament, but people who actually in the real government. And they could actually raise the issue and perhaps rally around it from a humanitarian point of view. That seems to be one of the only hopes you have of breaking the sort of logjam on this issue, which is almost like you get no movement whatsoever on this, but because nobody wants to champion it. It doesn't have a lot of political capital attached to it. There's not much to gain if you are championing this in a Western country. But if you could break the siege, as it were, the political siege, there is a chance that crack would appear and you would get more support coming in, and maybe some media attention as well. But this is the challenge, and I'm afraid this is really difficult.
Well, it is, but I mean, how many members does UK Column have? If every single member made the effort to write a letter or write an email, the sheer influx of demands to actually look at the humanitarian effects. And as I say, there is an excellent statement now that is in UN archives. They can't ignore it anymore. The UN has ignored this also to a large degree for the last 11 years. But, Alina Durhan has actually really done a fantastic job. I was shocked And it demonstrates to some extent the sea change as regards Syria, because she openly stated in the first or second paragraph that actually most of the information came through government institutions, Syrian civil society, and medical care centers, etc. So this is a kind of a normalization of the government agency in Syria, which has not been accepted before, even by the UN. Taking back agency, we do have agency. I mean, I always remember, and both of you will remember in 2016, when our little campaign actually really did prevent the White Helmets getting the Nobel Peace Prize. So it is possible to do. And I have to say, it's very satisfying. If people are feeling helpless and that they can't do anything about the world as it is today, you can. You can. Don't wait for the small minority that are doing something to do it for you. Please go and do it yourselves, because you do really have the power to change, but you just have to believe in that, and you have to do it in large enough numbers to have an effect.